Mutual abuse does not exist. Now, I'm going to assume that this was said in good faith because you follow me and you quoted research. But I will argue that mutual abuse does not exist and is nothing more than a phrase coined by abusers to evade accountability for the harm that they cause. So let's unpack it. First of all, it makes no logical sense. Abuse is about power and control over another. One person is trying to control another. There is no shared power in these dynamics because the very value system that drive abusive behavior don't allow it. Entitlement, objectification, expectation of submission, a perceived hierarchy of power. Second, the person that has the power manipulates the victim by pushing them to their limit until they react back. They then use this reaction to convince them that they are also being abusive, aka gaslighting. This reaction now serves the narrative of mutual abuse, where the real abuser can evade accountability. This falls under the fourth pillar of abuse, where those at the top of the hierarchy are able to use punishment, violence, or coercion without consequence. The person reacting to abuse isn't trying to control their abuser. They're trying to regain control of themselves. They just want their autonomy back. Now, you referenced 50 studies that report bidirectional abuse in 40 to 60% of couples. Bidirectional meaning mutual abuse. So I don't know which study you're referring to, but I assume that it's a literary review. I found 2 of them. One in January of 2012 and one in August of 2023. The review written in 2023 I wasn't able to read. Only the abstract was available online. So if anyone has access to this review and would like to send it to me, please do. So let's discuss the one from 2012. So first of all, the review in 2012 included studies from 1990 on. So we're looking at research that's 20 to 30 years old. Terminology, definitions have all changed. Tools of measurements have all changed. The research would no longer be relevant today when you consider that up until the late 80s, early 90s, men could not be legally charged for raping their wife. And this is relevant because it represents the mindset of people in these relationships at the time when these studies were being conducted. Next, it says the rates of bidirectional abuse were summarized directly as reported. I would need to look at every single study to determine how mutual abuse was being measured, because a lot of these studies use self-reporting measurement tools. So if the victims of abuse are being convinced by their abuser that they too are abusive, then they will be reporting the false concept of mutual abuse. This means that all of the evidence that support mutual abuse are no longer valid until they can create measurement tools that control for gaslighting. Every study that I did have access to that reported bidirectional abuse, the hypothesis was related to gender differences of reported abuse, basically looking for evidence that not all men instigate abuse in relationships, since they weren't controlling for things like reacting to abuse or gaslighting. Determining that because both parties reported they were both abusive, that's just a straw man argument. I appreciate that you went to research, but even when we look at research, we have to use our critical thinking skills. We cannot jump to conclusions and make assumptions about the results. So just because 40 to 60% of self-reporting measurements indicate that abuse is bidirectional, research that isn't controlling for psychological manipulation and gaslighting is irrelevant. You asked me to do more than a Google search. We need to make sure that the research we're using is relevant to the argument we're making.